Hello and welcome to the machine. What I want to talk about is self-maintenance and how I think that's broadly something that's underappreciated when it comes to improving yourself. What I mean by this is having things that are clean, having comfortable places to sleep, making sure that your appearance is in order. A lot of subtle, small things can really add to your confidence in the aggregate. And so, doing things that broadly speak to maintaining yourself are things that are an important part of bettering yourself. If you are deciding, I want to learn a ton about English, or Japanese or whatever, or mathematics, and you just suddenly like forget basic hygiene, you're going to sort of disadvantage yourself in other ways that are going to make it harder for the advantages that you accrue to actually have meaningful results. So giving up important self-maintenance tips can undermine your approach to bettering yourself. I have a couple things that I want to talk about. Uh, or one of the things I want to talk about first is sleep. I've noticed that I have a lot more willpower with regards to food, with regards to video games, when I get a decent night's sleep the night before. And so I think to myself that if I don't sleep very well, I end up not really having the skills or the mindset to get into self-improvement, to do the hard work, because sometimes it's too challenging. But when I get enough sleep, it makes it easier to do so. Similarly, when I dress well and I go to work, I feel good, and it makes it more easy for me to start fraternizing and socializing with the people around me. If I decided, oh, I love work so much, I'm just gonna come in like a mess with my hair all over the place, wearing wearing just like the titty cups with little sparkles, I'm probably not gonna be doing too well unless my self-esteem's on the moon. But a lot of times your self-esteem isn't on the moon, and so it doesn't really make sense to neglect something that is so essential. So what is self-maintenance then? Because I'm giving a bunch of examples, but I haven't really explained or I haven't really gone into detail about what type of self-maintenance matters. First, self-maintenance is anything you do to maintain yourself. So it's making sure you tend not to fall below a certain threshold as opposed to moving on. A good example is something that's routine, like wiping your ass or brushing your teeth. These are things people do every day, probably a couple times a day, depending on whether or not they order Taco Bell. And failing to do these things really makes you seem a little bit like a buffoon, like you haven't really gotten with the program. And so when you're thinking about what you want to do as self-maintenance, you should consider how you approach problems to also be part of self-maintenance. If you have a haphazard idea and you're sort of bumbling around and you don't really know what types of things you need to do, the things that you need to do to maintain yourself aren't routine, they aren't effectively self-maintenance. They're sort of making an all-in-one, an all-in poker play as opposed to something that is routine, that is expected, that is comfortable. So, what does this have to do with identity? So, a big part of identity is internalizing the specific habits as something that you do. So, I work out a lot, and so I think of myself as someone who works out a lot, which in turn makes it easier for me to work out because I see it as a priority. I see it as something I need to do to maintain congruence, to maintain my comfort. If I don't work out, I'll feel worse. And internalizing this idea that I'm the sort of person who gets up early and I'm the sort of person who's grateful and has a gratitude journal, or the sort of person who makes YouTube videos. If you see yourself as that sort of person and you do the mindset shift, whereas you internalize this is part of your identity, it becomes a whole lot easier to do it as opposed to fighting against it. One of the reasons that diets don't really work is if you see yourself as like somebody who like really needs sugar and you get off the diet, well, you're going to go back to your same habits before, and your same habits kind of brought you to the place you were before. So your habits matter, and self-maintenance is an important habit to establish. With that in mind, I want to start considering why these identities are important. So your identity with regards to self-help relies on a couple fundamental things you need to decide about yourself. And people think that fashioning the sorts of things you want to do every day is enough to make you into a specific sort of person. But it's not quite that way. Um, I've been reading this book called Atomic Habits, really recently, and one big theme in this is that it's a bunch of small 1% decisions, and if you combine them in the aggregate, if you're constantly looking for small ways of improving your approach, before you know it, the small differences add up. This idea is kind of similarly discussed in Tyler Cowen's book Stubborn Attachments, which is a much more interesting book about economic growth, but cross-applying economic growth to habits brings an interesting parallel. Because when you learn to consider the long term and the sorts of things you want to do, you want to be the sort of person who does the self habits every day because that's something you can't imagine not doing. So, so what sort of self-help habits do I do that tend to make me feel a little bit better? One of them is I make my bed every day, or at least almost every day. I try to do this because it makes it so that when I come back after a long day of work, it's done, and so I feel good going to sleep. I don't feel like there's something really wrong. And B, because it's an easy way of starting my day and getting a small little win out of the way. Like I have done something that makes me feel more comfortable and will make me feel more comfortable later. And sort of recognizing that I'm going to feel more comfortable later on in the day, I become satisfied now. So in a weird way, the intertemporal discounting, which basically is like in the short term, I'd feel great eating peanut butter cups. If you start to rewire how you approach these things and think about the satisfaction that you're going to feel later when it comes to comparing it to the cost now, recognizing the satisfaction almost creates some of the satisfaction that you need to better yourself or to get these sorts of things. When I went to the gym today, I was feeling like shit, but I was telling myself, this is something I'm doing that's making me feel great. This is something that I am improving in, and I like that. And seeing that instead of as something that's negative or something I have to do, I've become more optimistic about it. Your mindset matters, and what you tell yourself when it comes to doing things makes a difference. So if you see sleep somewhat antagonistically, you think you can consistently avoid it, if you see your diet as something that's not really too important, it won't be important to you. And the sorts of benefits that accrue from caring about your diet, from eating less sugar, from drinking less, from working out more, from sleeping more, from reading more, from learning more, won't come. One thing I've always thought about myself, and I know this is a little bit arrogant, is I think I'm really smart. I'm not like smart like an average way. I'm smart like the almost ace the SAT sort of way with like very little help and no tutoring. And I think part of the reason why I did well on that, and part of the reason why to this day I understand information pretty quickly and I have an effective memory, is sort of the power of my own belief. I've accepted that I'm going to work to make that congruent with my reality, and things that I might not even be good at, I sort of have the faith in myself that I will become good at these things so I don't give up in that specific sector. By contrast, I don't consider myself especially athletic. And because of that, I've kind of dropped the ball on taking care of myself in a physical sense. I didn't really do sports in college, nor did I do sports in high school, and I was somewhat fat and frankly kind of ugly as a result of that. I didn't put the time and effort into building the social groups associated with that in terms of being part of a team and a broader community. And as a result, I have not improved myself as much as I could have. But I'm not going to cry over spilt milk. I'm not going to cry over sour grapes. I'm not going to keep referencing Aesop's fables. That was three, enough out of me. Instead, I want to talk about the sorts of things that I can still do. No one's a perfect person, and no one gets everything right. But I'm 22, and if the average life expectancy is 83, first of all, I'm going to live till I'm a fucking 100. I know it's going to happen. But second of all, knowing that I have so much time to achieve my goals if I set my mind to them. And so I don't even need to stop with them, and I can continue to set more ambitious goals, recognizing that now has made it so that I'm able to focus on the long term. I think I'm going to work out for the rest of my life. I don't think I'm going to stop for a prolonged period of time. For the last couple weeks, I've been doing push-ups every night, sit-ups and squats. Before that, when I was in Europe, I did push-ups most nights and I walked a ton. And before that, I would be running every night and just setting myself up to recognize that I'm going to be doing some form of physical activity and it's going to be kind of hard and uncomfortable to begin with has made me into a much more mentally happy person. And it's made me a little bit less caring about other people because frankly, I think there's a point to this idea of not feeling good all the time. We don't feel good all the time because we don't always do things that are good for us. If you eat ice cream, you're not going to feel fucking wonderful. You're going to feel like, wow, I ate ice cream and I feel fat and my stomach is bulging. Um, and it's okay to feel that way. I think people think that it's not okay to feel bad about yourself, but if you use feeling bad about yourself in a way that just beats you down, that's not going to be great. But if you use the sort of inspiration, and use it as a way of, I want to become more congruent with being a healthy, well-adjusted person, you're going to be worlds better than somebody who just sort of sits around and is complacent with who they are. I think a lot of people numb themselves on purpose. I've done that in the past with fast food and with ice cream. Oh my God, I fucking love ice cream. But I've done it with ice cream. I've done it with sex, frankly. I've done it with drugs. And I'm not really proud of that. Because I think that a lot of times by doing that, I have made myself a worse person. And I can make myself a better person. I can make myself a better person by reading more, by understanding more about how other people think, by practicing, by being assertive. When you make a decision that you're going to continue to be, or when you're going to be something more like that, write it down. Pay attention to it and think of the sorts of things you have to do every day to do it. You're not going to be feeling motivated every day. I don't feel motivated every day, and I'm sure you don't either. The fact that you're watching this YouTube video is probably a sign that you're chronically online. I don't know why I keep going into this verse or this rhyming, but I think it is broadly important to recognize that you won't get anywhere without prolonged long-term work. And this long-term work takes a while, and there's not like a seven steps to immediately become a crypto millionaire or whatever. But frankly, it makes more sense to be the sort of person who actually provides the value for yourself so that you don't sort of rely on chance in the same way. What I mean by this is pretty simple. If you are the sort of person who wants to be CEO or wants to be successful with girls or wants to have friends, if you're only thinking about the benefits that you can get out of something as opposed to the sort of person who can provide for these other people, you're going to be perpetually disappointed because people, frankly, are pretty self-centered like yourself. So if you understand what other people want and you're able to provide that, first of all, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort to figure out how to do this. But when you do that, you're going to have a much deeper understanding and appreciation of other people. And you're going to be better at being able to use that to make yourself into the sort of person that they'd want. Think of the friend of your dreams, the book of your dreams, the girl of your dreams, the job of your dreams. These things are your dreams because you haven't figured out what you need to do to be the sort of person who deserves that. Making small steps towards this improvement every single day, this idea of constantly putting yourself in a little bit of tension, but not too much, um, is how you do it. If you believe in yourself, if you think that you can do it, you'll be able to. Or at the very least, you'll be a lot more likely to. You can't do something if you don't believe in yourself. And although you might not get it, if you do believe in yourself, having a plan is a much better chance. You're 100% at least more likely to get something if you believe you're going to be able to do it. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to me talk. And this has been The Machine, and I hope you have a nice night.